My favorite Christmas memory would have to be back in the 70s. We would go to my grandmother's every year, my grandma Opal. We would go to her house and celebrate Christmas every year. And after we would have this big feast, we would all gather around the Christmas tree in the living room. But before we would open up our gifts, she always opened up the Bible and handed it to my uncle, and he began to read Luke chapter 2. Around the time of Elizabeth's amazing pregnancy and John's birth, the emperor in Rome, Caesar Augustus, required everyone in the Roman Empire to participate in a massive census. The first census since Quirinius had become governor of Syria. Each person had to go to his or her ancestral city to be counted. Mary's fiancé Joseph, from Nazareth in Galilee, had to participate in the census in the same way everyone else did. Because he was a descendant of King David, his ancestral city was in Bethlehem, David's birthplace. Mary, who was now late in her pregnancy, that the messenger Gabriel had predicted, accompanied Joseph. While in Bethlehem, she went into labor and gave birth to her firstborn son. She wrapped the baby in a blanket and laid him in a feeding trough because the inn had no room for them. Nearby, in the fields outside of Bethlehem, a group of shepherds were guarding their flocks from predators in the darkness of night. Suddenly, a messenger of the Lord stood in front of them, and the darkness was replaced by a glorious light, the shining light of God's glory. They were terrified. "Don't be afraid. Listen, I bring good news of great joy, news that will affect all people everywhere. Today, in the city of David, a liberator has been born for you. He is the promised anointed one, the supreme authority. You will know that you have found him when you see a baby wrapped in a blanket lying in a feeding trough." At that moment, the first heavenly messenger was joined by thousands of other messengers, a vast heavenly choir, and they praised God. To the highest heights of the universe, glory to God, and on earth, peace among all people who bring pleasure to God. As soon as the heavenly messengers disappeared into heaven, the shepherds were buzzing with conversation. "Let's rush down to Bethlehem right now. Let's see what's happening. Let's experience what the Lord has told us about." So they ran into town, and eventually they found Mary and Joseph and the baby lying in the feeding trough. After they saw the baby, they spread the story of what they had experienced and what had been said to them about this child. Everyone who heard their story couldn't stop thinking about its meaning. Mary, too, pondered all of these events, treasuring each memory in her heart. The shepherds returned to their flocks, praising God for all they had seen and heard, and they glorified God for the way the experience had unfolded, just as the heavenly messenger had predicted. I think I relate to Mary the most in the Christmas story, being a mother. When she first held Jesus in her arms, and you swaddled that baby, and just rocking him, makes me think of my own children. And at that point, you realize it's not just us anymore. Now there's someone else with us. And I'm sure she had the same concerns as all parents do. You know, she was such a young mother, but to think that, when baby Jesus cried, was it because he was hungry? Did he need changed? Was he hurting? And as mothers, we all think that same thing. And as we go through our children's lives, and I'm sure as she did with Jesus, you always try to protect your kids. You want to protect them from bullies. You want to protect them from just anything and everything that happens. And you want to protect them as toddlers and as they go into school. But especially when they get into high school and they begin to drive and they get that little bit of independence. Life 360 is a great friend. And I'm sure if Mary could have had Life 360 and she could have watched Jesus as he would travel from Bethlehem up to the Sea of Galilee, I'm sure she would have enjoyed that as well. I think too, as your kids move through different stages of life and they move out and they go into college or they purchase their own home and they get away from you, I think this is the most difficult part about parenting. You can no longer have that control over them. You can give advice, but will they take it? And I'm sure Mary did the same thing with Jesus. You can't protect your children, and she couldn't protect him. And he was beaten, he was ridiculed, he was mocked, he was spit upon. And I'm sure she wanted to save him. Grief is the price that we pay for love. And Jesus died upon the cross, goes back to the gift. And the best gift that we can get in life is from God. And he sent his son to be born of a virgin to die on a cross to save us. And that was the greatest gift that he could ever give us. And he says in John 3:16, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him shall not perish but have everlasting life." He loved and he gave. If we believe, we will live with him forever in eternity. And during this Christmas season, we need to think about the love and that special gift that he gave to us. And as I was talking about earlier, my favorite memory goes on. Mike and I have started a tradition too in our family when our boys were young, that every Christmas Eve when we gathered around the tree, before we opened our gifts, we too read the Christmas story. Have a Merry Christmas.